In late 2018, Mark Reynolds moved his family out of their cramped apartment in Chicago to a larger house in the suburbs of Naperville. He thought the move would finally give his wife Lisa and their children 12 years old Nathan and 8 years old Mia some space to breathe. The house they bought stood at the end of the quiet street, surrounded by tall oak trees. It was an older two-story home, painted white, with a wide backyard and a tire swing hanging from a thick branch. Despite its age, it felt inviting, quiet and private, a perfect place to start fresh. The first few nights were uneventful. The creaks of the wooden floor and the occasional flickers of lights were normal enough for an old house. But on the third night, Ethan woke around 2 in the morning. He had heard the swing moving outside, back and forth in the still air. At first, he thought it was the wind, but when he looked out the window, he saw a tall, dark figure standing near the oak tree, facing the house. The figure didn't move. It just stood there. Ethan shut the curtains and told himself it was a trick of the shadows, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In the days that followed, strange things kept happening. Mia began complaining about knocking on her bedroom door late at night, soft, deliberate taps that seemed to move along the walls. One evening, Mark was in the living room when he heard footsteps pacing the upstairs hallway. Even though the children were at school and Lisa was in the kitchen, the attic became the most unsettling part of the house. One afternoon, Mark decided to inspect it. Dust covered every surface and old furniture that previous owners had left behind stood silently in the corners. On the far wall, someone had scratched strange marks into the wooden panel. Lines, circles, and crude figures that made no sense. The attic also had some old burnout candles and some markings on the floor that depicted of some sinister happenings, perhaps a dark ritual or something. Mark tried to keep calm. He locked the attic door and didn't mention anything to Lisa. But the strange events escalated. One night around 3 a.m., Lisa woke to a weight on the foot of the bed. Something or someone was sitting there. She opened her eyes to a vague silhouette, tall and silent, at the end of the bed, its head tilted slightly, observing her carefully. She screamed and Mark woke instantly. When the lights came on, the figure had vanished, leaving only the impressions of weight on the mattress bed. The children were not spared either. Ethan woke one night to find the attic door slightly ajar. Though Mark had locked it, he heard scratching from above, like fingernails dragging across the floorboard. Then, a whisper low and hollow called his name. Terrified, he ran to his room and locked the door. Mark decided to talk to an elderly neighbor, Mr. Catwell, who had lived there on the street for decades. When he mentioned the house, the man's face changed. "Keep an eye on the kids when they play outside," Mr. Catwell warned. "Those woods behind the house, things happen there." Mark nodded, unease growing, but he tried to stay rational. One stormy night, the power went out across the neighborhood. The house was plunged into darkness, the wind rattling the windows. The family huddled in the living room when footsteps began upstairs. Heavy, deliberate, step by step, they stopped at the top of the staircase. Lightning flashed, and Ethan glimpsed a tall silhouette standing perfectly still. Its arms hung unnaturally low, its head slightly too long. Then it began to descend. Each step made the old wooden stairs groan under its weight. Another flash revealed it halfway down, its hollow eyes reflecting the brief light. The children screamed. Lisa grabbed them and Mark ran to the front door. When he opened it, the storm pouring in, lightning illuminated the figure in the living room for a single horrifying second. Pale, thin, and impossibly still, its face stretched into an unnatural silent smile. Its eyes weren't looking at them. They were staring past them towards the backyard, towards the oak tree and the gently swaying swing. Mark got his wife and the kids immediately into his car, and they fled the scene. After fleeing into the storm, the Reynolds family spent the night at the hotel in Naperville. Even there, they couldn't sleep. Ethan kept glancing towards the window, convinced he saw a dark figure moving in the distance. Mia clutched Lisa's hand, whispering that he's still out there. Mark tried to reassure them, but he himself was very afraid. The next day, Mark returned to the house during daylight, telling himself he needed to gather some belongings they had left behind. The street was quiet. The house looked normal from the outside, almost mundane. And when its white paint slightly faded and the tall oak tree looming over the backyard. But as Mark walked up the driveway, he felt a chill and instinctively glanced at the swing. It was moving slightly back and forth, even though there was no wind. Inside the house seemed ordinary until he reached the living room once again. On the floor, there were footprints in the dust, long, thin, and oddly spaced. They led from the back door towards the staircase. Mark froze. He wasn't alone in the house. He backed out slowly, but then he heard it, a soft scraping sound from the attic above. Slowly the attic door creaked open. Mark's hand trembled as he reached for it. Peering inside, he saw the circle of old candles once again lit, now arranged in a very evenly order in a circular form. Chills ran down his spine. Suddenly, Mark heard a whisper from behind him. "You shouldn't be here." He spun around, but the room was empty. The shadows in the corner seemed to move subtly, as though it was alive. The air felt heavier and colder. He grabbed a few boxes, trying to leave quickly, but as he passed the staircase, he froze again. A figure stood at the bottom of the step, this time very clear, tall, thin, motionless, and his head tilted. The figure didn't move when Mark stared, it just watched. Mark ran out, slamming the door behind him, heart pounding. That evening, back at the hotel, he tried to convince himself that the house was abandoned, or that the figure was a trick of the light and shadow. But the children were convinced otherwise. Ethan refused to eat. Mia hid under the blanket. 2 nights later, Mark realized they couldn't keep running forever. They had to face the house to understand what they were dealing with, or risk never returning at all. He called Lisa and explained that they would need to go back, but this time together, prepared. As they arrived at night, everything was unnervingly quiet. Inside the house was dark. He flicked on a flashlight and cautiously moved towards the hallway. Every floorboard groaned under their weight. In the living room, the front door had been left slightly ajar. They hadn't left it that way. A chill swept through the room. Then it started once again. Faint, almost rhythmic knocks coming from the walls. Moving up the hallway, then down, like something or someone was pacing inside the structure itself. Mark tried to ignore it first, but the noise escalated. The attic door creaked and shook violently, as though someone or something was trying to push it open from the inside. Lisa grabbed the children and pulled them down the hallway. Suddenly, Mia froze as she pointed towards the back door. To the faint light of the moon, they saw it. a tall, faceless figure standing still in the backyard, motionless, perfectly aligned with the swing. The air around it seemed to shimmer slightly, like the atmosphere itself recoiled in its presence. Mark shined the flashlight outside. The figure didn't move, but its head slowly turned towards the house. Then it raised an arm, not quickly but deliberately, and pointed straight at the attic. Mark's blood ran cold. The attic, that had been the epicenter of the previous encounters. They crept upstairs slowly, Ethan and Mia trembling behind their parents. The attic door was slightly open. Mark pushed it, flashlight trembling in his hands. As the scratching began from behind a stack of old furniture, fingernails scraped across the floorboards. A deep guttural breathing echoed from the corners of the attic. Mark swung the flashlight around. A figure crouched in the shadows, impossibly tall, its face stretched into a wide, unnatural grin, its eyes black and hollow. Ethan screamed. The figure sprang forward, but instead of moving normally, it flickered like it was shifting through space. Every time Mark tried to aim the flashlight, the shape disappeared and reappeared closer. Lisa grabbed the children and ran. Mark followed them. As they reached the staircase, they realized something terrifying. The house itself seemed alive. The walls groaned, the floorboards shifted underfoot. The back door slammed shut behind them with a force that rattled the grass. Outside now, the figure was gone, but the swing still moved. They fled into the night and didn't stop running. For days, the children refused to sleep, claiming the shadow was still watching them from the windows, corners, even from dark alleys during their errands. Weeks later, Mark, unable to resist, returned to the property once more, this time in daylight. The house looked normal, empty, silent, no scratches, no shadows. It was as if nothing had happened, but in the backyard, the tire swing swayed gently in the wind, and faint, elongated footsteps led towards the tree that vanished into the dirt. Mark never spoke of it again, but the children would wake in the middle of the night, staring at the dark corners of the bedroom. Even today, the house stands at the end of that quiet street. The oak tree towers over the yard, the swing slowly swaying in the breeze. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, neighbors swear to see a tall figure standing near the tree.